Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Our guest today is Gerrit He's the Senior Political Advisor to the Formosa Association for Public Affairs. Gerrit, we've been talking about the mission of the FAPA and the current state of the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan. And as you mentioned that as a result of lack of communication or better communication between the two governments, there have been some misunderstandings or miscommunications. How do you see the current problems or difficulties between Taiwan and the U.S.?
Well, on the one hand, you do have the high expectations on the Taiwan side of relations. Taiwan did go through its democratic transition 10, 15 years ago, and it expected that it would then be more accepted in the international community. And that has not happened yet, and that is one aspect of the relation with the United States. The United States has said, well, very well done, you have made your transition to democracy. But the U.S. government is still very much stuck in the policies that they had in the 1970s, the One China policy, and they have not wanted to rethink the One China policy. That's one of the problems on the American side. And they have been preoccupied with so many other things. I just mentioned a minute ago Iraq. China has become more important in trying to resolve other issues like North Korea, Iran, Sudan. So for those issues, the United States does need China. But our argument has always been that should not be at the expense of Taiwan.
But do you have the concern that the U.S. might see Taiwan as a troublemaker when they are dealing with China?
No, I don't think so. That has been the label that the Kuomintang has been trying to put on the DPP government, and some in the United States have used that word. But on the other hand, you do see a person like Dana Rohrabacher, one of the members of the House of Representatives, who did state when President Lee Teng-hui came to Washington 3 years ago, Washington is a city of troublemakers. George Washington was a troublemaker. Thomas Jefferson was a troublemaker. What he was basically saying that we want to change the status quo in a better direction. The status quo at the present time is felt by Taiwan as a restriction on their international room for maneuver. And that's why people who are supportive of Taiwan in the U.S. Congress are saying, well, we should try to get Taiwan more into the international community in World Health Organization, United Nations, and so on and so forth.
But let's talk about the most recent controversial issues surrounding the U.S.-Taiwan relation. That is Taiwan's referendum on the bid to join the UN. And some high-ranking officials from Washington accused Taiwan of, or criticized Taiwan for being provocative by pushing for the UN bid. How do you see that?
Well, we find it very regrettable that the Bush administration has taken this position, because a referendum is generally perceived as an expression of the voice of a people, and in particular in the situation of Taiwan, where there is still a searching for a future status of Taiwan. It is important to let the voice of the people be heard. So therefore, we find it, as FAPA and a number of people in Congress have also expressed that position, regrettable that the Bush administration has voiced its opposition. If the Bush administration really wants to support democracy around the world, it should support those countries that have become democratic and are voicing their position in a democratic fashion, and therefore they should be much more supportive of the UN referendum. That is the position that we as FAPA have taken, and that is the position that quite a number of the people in the US Congress have taken.
But from what we have seen so far, the US position seems to be very strong, and what can we do to ease the concerns of the US government officials?
Well, the U.S. Is, of course, concerned about it because of China's reaction. If there were no China reaction, U.S. would either not say anything about it
I
or
agree.
would even be supportive of it. So it is China that has, in a sense, used the United States to pressurize Taiwan. And that is really the regrettable thing of this, that the American government, the Bush administration, has let itself be used by China to pressure Taiwan. What we can do is, I think, one, go ahead with the referendum and try to get the referendum passed, get as many people in Taiwan to vote on it and vote positive on the referendum. And then at that point in time, there is a position that the Taiwanese people have spoken out in favor of. And then gradually you can work further in the direction of Taiwan's membership in the United Nations. It's going to be a long process, everybody realizes that, but we have to take it step by step, and this is an important step.
But some people are concerned that if we pass the referendum, then the relation between Taiwan and the U.S. will even go down further. Do you think that would be the case?
No, not really, because both on the Taiwan side as well as on the American side, we do realize that the downward spiral, which has taken place for a number of reasons that I indicated earlier, is not beneficial for both sides. So you do see on the American side also efforts going on to, again, get a positive, constructive relation going between the United States and Taiwan. One example is the report that was just issued by Dan Blumenthal and Randy Shriver.
Taiwan Policy Review.
Why Taiwan Matters is the title of that report, and I think it's a very positive and constructive report. And I know that on the Democratic side there are also people thinking along very much the same line. So I believe that when there is a next administration in the United States, then there will be an upward turn again.
We mentioned earlier that there's a lack of better communication between the high-ranking officials from both sides. And do you think that the U.S. government perceive that as a problem and that needs to be fixed?
Well, they are saying that there is enough communication.
That's what they say.
They say there's communication through AIT and there's probably some other communication channels. But the mere fact that President Bush has never met President Chen, has never looked him into the eye, has never talked to him directly face to face, is very important of the perception that President Bush has of President Chen. So if they could meet personally, then that would really make a lot of difference. And we find it rather incredible that the Bush administration is talking to Iran, is talking to Palestinian authorities, and is not talking to the democratically elected head of a government of Taiwan. So that is really the irony in the American position. Of course, the Americans say, well, we have to do realpolitik, Henry Kissinger's idea that power politics is all important. But we have to convince the American government also that there is something like ideals and principles for which they have to stand. And I believe there are quite a number of people in the U.S. government who take that position. But right now they are perhaps not in the majority or don't have sufficient influence in the Bush administration.
Some other things that are related to the lack of communication is some of the restrictions on Taiwan's government officials' visits to the states, especially to Washington, D.C. Now our foreign minister cannot go to Washington, D.C., let alone talking to Secretary of State and so on. Are you also lobbying for the lifting of the restrictions on those high-ranking officials from Taiwan?
Yes, indeed. That has been our main priority over the past 2 years, and we have worked with people in Congress and introduced the so-called high-level resolution, which advocates that the U.S. should end the restrictions on high-level contacts between people on the high officials on the American side and on the Taiwanese side. And that resolution was actually passed virtually unanimously in the House of Representatives last year. It was introduced on the Senate side in October, and we are now working hard to get more support for that resolution. So it can move forward and it can be passed, and that will be the position of the US Congress vis-a-vis the administration.
But how's the response from the administration?
Well, the administration again has said this is a policy which we have had for 6 administrations. This is a policy which has worked well. We don't have diplomatic relations with Taiwan, so therefore we do not have meetings with high officials from Taiwan. We argue that this is an outdated policy which is based on a situation in the 1970s when the government in Taiwan, the Kuomintang government, said, we are the government of all of China. That claim was not recognized, but that situation has basically turned around totally after Taiwan's democratic transition. And after Taiwan's democratic transition, you have a government here which does represent the people, which speaks on behalf of the people, which is elected by the people. So there's all the reasons in the world for the American government to speak directly to such a government.
Apparently, the bottom line is the so-called one China policy. In other words, the U.S. so far has, especially the administration, has so far failed to address the outdated nature of the one China policy. But among the think tankers or the Congress people, maybe they are thinking about that. Do you think that's a progress on the part of the U.S. when it comes to the issue of Taiwan?
Yes, in the think tanks there are quite a number of people who have done some long-range, out-of-the-box thinking to rethink the One China policy or to redefine it, and that is a process that is still ongoing. The problem is, at the present time, as I indicated earlier, the administration is so preoccupied with Iraq and Iran now. So therefore, there's hardly any possibility for people higher up in the administration to do some out-of-the-box thinking in this direction, and therefore they relegate themselves to just reiterating the mantra of the One China policy. I have talked to several high officials in the administration who have since left the administration, and they say that's basically all we can do at the present time, reiterate the mantra. So they themselves find that very unsatisfactory. So hopefully it is feasible that if there is a new administration on the American side, that new administration will move in the direction of basically trying to find new solutions for the U.S.-Taiwan relations, which are more satisfactory to Taiwan, which give Taiwan more international space, and which really move away from this outdated concept that is presently still the basis of U.S.-Taiwan policy.
In addition to the so-called One China policy, which you say is very outdated, and the U.S. government is also upholding the so-called status quo policy. So when we come back, we'll talk about the so-called status quo policy and whether that is a good policy in maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan state. And stay with us. We'll be back after this message.